Hey guys, tonight we wander into the straw-strewn chaos of a medieval fairground. Not the Disneyfied version with shiny costumes and carefully curated turkey legs, but the sticky, noisy, slightly smelly reality of what villagers in 13th century Europe actually did for fun. Spoiler: it involves live geese, questionable love potions, and someone definitely wrestling a pig. You're not just watching, you're there. On muddy ground. In worn shoes. With someone's elbow in your side. You arrive before the sun's even cleared the treetops. The grass beneath your feet is damp, not with dew but with last night's spilled ale, and the somewhat less romantic results of overexcited livestock. The scent hits first: hay, roasted eel, and something suspiciously garlicky, but not in a good way. It's as if the fair has been fermenting overnight, and just woke up before brushing its teeth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the center of the field, your cloak trailing a bit of straw behind you, and try to ignore the unmistakable squish of something underfoot. Maybe a pear. Maybe not. Either way, you're here, and so is everyone else. Fairs don't happen every day, or even every month. In some towns, they're the highlight of the entire year, marked on calendars that still think leeches are a viable medical treatment. Around you, carts creak to a halt and tents bloom like canvas mushrooms. Vendors shout over each other in accents you can barely place, jostling for the best spots near the central path. A man with 2 teeth and 12 kinds of pickled vegetables is already arguing with a woman selling eel pies. She's winning. You pass a row of tethered animals, sheep, pigs, even a skinny cow that's giving you side-eye. Someone tries to sell you a blessed chicken egg, allegedly touched by a bishop, but you suspect it's just very old. You smile politely and decline. The egg seller grumbles about outsiders and curses your future offspring, but gently, like he's done it 100 times before. Historians still argue whether medieval fairs were mainly about trade or entertainment. Some say they were crucial to the local economy, while others suggest they were just an excuse for peasants and nobles alike to pretend the rules didn't exist for a few days. What's not debated? They were loud, crowded, and full of people trying to make a quick coin, just like today's pop-up food markets, but with more mud and fewer vegan options. A faint bell rings somewhere beyond the trees, probably a nearby chapel reminding you that, yes, this chaos is still happening in the shadow of holy ground. A friar wanders past muttering something about modesty, while a woman in a scandalously short tunic, by 1200 standards, her ankles are showing, dances barefoot in a circle of other young women. You catch the scent of crushed rosemary from their braided hair. It almost masks the smell of the pigs. Nearby, children dash between carts, giggling and waving sticks like knights in training. One of them has a dead rat on a string. You don't ask. You duck under a banner strung between 2 crooked poles, crudely painted with a lion, or maybe a dog, and enter the fair proper. A juggler nearly clocks you in the head with a spinning knife, and his assistant yells, "You walk like a monk with fleas." It's probably meant as a joke. Probably. A harpist begins to play from a makeshift platform of barrels. The tune is haunting, slow, and in a minor key that makes you feel like you've stumbled into a folk horror movie. Then he sneezes mid-verse and mutters something unrepeatable in Old French. Someone throws a turnip in appreciation. The strange thing is, even with the mud, the smells, and the sensory overload, it's oddly charming. There's a rhythm to the madness, a comfort in the disorganized harmony of it all. You start to notice patterns. The seller with garlic strings braided into her hair, the barrel of apples with a sign that says "Try not to eat one," and the barefoot man preaching to an audience of 2 geese and a confused child. A vendor near you begins unpacking what he calls saintly stones, just smooth river rocks with chalk drawings of halos. Another claims to be selling relics from the Holy Land, but you're pretty sure the bone of St. Cuthbert looks a lot like a chicken wing. Still, people are buying. And isn't that the point? One merchant loudly hawks wool from a wizard's sheep. You don't know what that means, but it's going for triple the usual price. A young boy next to you asks his father if they can buy it for luck. The man replies, "Only if it stops raining during planting season." The boy nods solemnly, as if they both know that's never going to happen. Quirky as it all is, this was genuinely where people encountered the larger world. You might meet someone from the next shire over, or even from another country entirely. Someone speaks in a dialect you don't recognize. Another trader carries tiny bells from Spain. A woman passing by hums something that sounds suspiciously Byzantine. It's a microcosm of the world, right here in this muddy clearing. And above it all, the faint buzz of anticipation. The fair is just waking up. The bonfire pit is still cold. The maypole hasn't been raised yet. The drunks are still mostly sober. But give it time. By nightfall, there will be fire breathers, love charms, painted goats, and someone definitely losing their dignity in a turnip-eating contest. You, for now, find a patch of relatively clean hay beside a hay cart and just breathe it all in. The layered sense of sweat, sage, eel, and too much excitement for one muddy Tuesday. A loud honk jolts you upright, or maybe you were never truly seated, just swaying slightly, stuck between dream and roasted eel fumes. Either way, the procession has begun. And at the front, not a king, not a knight, not even a mayor. No, leading this grand opening of the fair is a flock of geese. And not just any geese. These waddling, feathered dignitaries wear tiny ribbons tied around their necks, and somehow, a look of deep judgment. You squint. Are those bells? Yes. Tiny bells. One particularly smug goose has 3, chiming softly with each pompous step. Behind them, 2 boys in mismatched hose try to keep the birds moving in a vaguely forward direction. One pokes with a stick, the other offers soggy bread as incentive. It's not elegant, but the crowd claps politely. Maybe it's tradition. Maybe everyone's just a little bored. The geese pause dramatically in front of the central tent, and for a moment, you suspect they might be planning something, perhaps a coup. But then, a shrill whistle cuts through the air, and a band of minstrels begins to play. It's hard to tell what tune they're attempting, since one of the lutes is painfully out of tune, and the flute player seems to be improvising in a different key entirely. A girl beside you says, "It's the goose anthem." You nod like that's something everyone should know. Historians still argue whether this whole goose parade was meant to invoke fertility rites, ward off evil, or simply keep bored peasants entertained while the beer stalls opened. Some chroniclers mention geese as sacred messengers, others call them a menace. One 14th-century priest described them as the demons of the barnyard. Fair. You follow the crowd as it trails after the birds, winding toward the food stalls. The path is lined with vendors who somehow manage to shout even louder now that there's a captive audience. A pickle seller is practically singing about his brine. "Sour as your mother-in-law, sweeter than your sins," he yells with questionable logic. You pass a booth entirely dedicated to large sculptures. A chubby cherub made of bacon fat smiles at you, disturbingly lifelike. Beside it, a man sells honeycombs shaped like saints. "Guaranteed to make your prayers 30% stickier," he promises. Children run alongside the geese now, tossing scraps and laughing as one particularly large bird hisses like it's been personally offended. And maybe it has. Geese are proud creatures, after all. Just ask any Roman historian who still insists they saved the city. A sudden cheer erupts as the lead goose, clearly the alpha, ascends a tiny wooden ramp and enters what can only be described as a goose throne. It's a crate, but it has velvet. Someone's even carved feathers into the wood. The bird sits, flaps once, and poops triumphantly. A local drummer starts a victory rhythm. You overhear a woman say, "Last year the lead goose bit the Reeves' son. He still has the mark." You believe her. Meanwhile, the noble overseeing the fair arrives late, flanked by guards with halberds that look slightly too clean, like they were just polished to impress, not to be used. The nobleman waves, receives a few half-hearted cheers, and steps around a pile of goose droppings with the practiced grace of someone who's done this before. He gives a brief speech about trade, prosperity, and the sacred union between man, land, and beast. Most of the crowd cheers at the word beast. A few simply hold up mugs of cider. You suspect many are already tipsy. It's barely noon. The geese, no longer the stars, are gently ushered back behind the main tent. One escapes and begins chasing a small dog, which begins chasing a child, which sets off a wonderfully circular spectacle you decide to quietly walk away from. Further down the fairground, a platform is being set up for the Dance of the Seven Trades, which, despite its exotic name, is essentially a group of local guild members waving hammers and spinning slowly in circles. You once heard that it's based on a pagan harvest rite. You also heard that last year someone fell off and broke his thumb. Either way, it's scheduled for later. You spot an older woman adjusting flowers on a makeshift altar nearby, marigolds, dried lavender, and something suspiciously like a beetroot. She's muttering under her breath, half prayer, half grocery list. A cloth banner above her reads, "Blessings for healthy cows, long marriages, and strong teeth." Is the blessing free, you ask? She eyes you. The words are yes. But the herbs cost a penny. You pay. Why not? Maybe your teeth will thank you. A nearby boy balances on one leg, trying to impress a girl by juggling 3 turnips. He drops 2, hits himself in the face with the third, and shrugs like he meant to. She giggles and walks away. Classic fairground romance. The air grows warmer. Somewhere behind you, a dog howls in harmony with the bagpipes. You feel a strange kind of joy, deeply human, muddy, ridiculous joy. This isn't the kind of happiness that comes from logic or comfort. This is the kind that comes from geese in hats and holy root vegetables. You wander past a stand where a man with 6 teeth paints tiny saints on snail shells. He says they bring luck, or possibly plague, but his accent's thick and you hope for the best. You find a shady patch under a crooked oak tree and sit for a moment, legs sore from trudging through muck and marvels. The geese are gone now, probably sulking in their crate, but their impact lingers, like tiny, honking heralds of absurdity. It's only midday. There's still a fire eater to nearly set himself ablaze. There are pies to sample, pigs to chase, jesters to heckle, and possibly a bear that dances poorly but means well. And if you're very lucky, or very unlucky, you might still be roped into the infamous cheese-rolling duel by nightfall. But that's another story. You've barely shaken the last goose feather from your cloak when the sound of shouting draws your attention back to the main path. It's not angry shouting, though in medieval Europe that distinction can be subtle, but more of a chaotic symphony of vendor pitches, minstrel tunes, and someone very loudly pretending to be a knight. You drift toward the sound like a moth to torchlight, already anticipating that nothing about what comes next will be quiet or reasonable. At the center of it all, a ragged trio of minstrels in varying states of sobriety, trying to outsing, outplay, and outgrin each other. One strums a lute with what might be his shoelace. Another blows into a flute, as if he's only just discovered it's not a dagger. The third, wearing a felt hat with a limp feather, belts out a tune about a girl from the next village who fell in love with a man who owned 17 goats and no sense of rhythm. It's oddly catchy. You stop beside a pickle cart, tempted by a free sample, when suddenly the pickle vendor lurches forward and yells, "That's not how the song goes, you ale-drowned squirrel." The minstrel retorts mid-verse, says the man whose pickles taste like sadness. A crowd is forming now, half enjoying the show, half pretending not to. You lean on the edge of a hay bale, caught in the tug-of-war between music, insults, and fermented vegetables. This, apparently, is a regular scene, vendors and entertainers competing for the same precious thing, attention. And coin. But mostly attention. Historians still argue whether this level of competition was encouraged by fair organizers to keep things lively, or just an inevitable side effect of putting 30 egos and one public square together without a schedule. As you eavesdrop, a boy with a tray of meat pies weaves through the crowd, shouting, "Hot pigeon. Get your hot pigeon," like it's a normal sentence. The smell is alarmingly appealing. Maybe it's the fare. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe it's the hypnotic effect of that lute string, which just snapped and hit the minstrel in the eyebrow. He barely flinches. Next to the pies, a woman sells candied walnuts by the handful. Her apron is stained with sugar and smoke, and her smile could sell rain to a drowning man. "Buy 2, she says, "and I'll throw in a love hex for free." You raise an eyebrow. She winks. You buy 3. Just across the path, a puppet show begins. The puppet master is missing 2 fingers and possibly a sense of shame. His puppets, a knight, a damsel, and a dragon with googly eyes made of beads, reenact a story that's equal parts tragedy and kitchen gossip. The children love it. One adult looks traumatized. A juggler steps into the open space in front of the puppet booth, trying to draw the crowd away. He starts with apples, progresses to torches, then attempts knives. You flinch. He drops one and bows anyway. People clap. A donkey brays in the distance, perhaps in approval. You hear someone call out, "Fire eater's up next," and the crowd shifts like a tide. You go with it, mostly because resisting would get you trampled. The fire eater stands on a barrel, bare-chested and smeared in ash. His assistant, possibly a cousin, possibly just a man who wandered by, is fanning the flames in a brazier while humming a song about boiled frogs. The performer drinks something from a tiny flask. You hope it's not moonshine, but you also hope it is, because this looks dangerous. He raises a torch, breathes out, and a plume of fire lights up the midday sky. People gasp. A woman faints. The goat tied to the pie stand runs in circles. Someone mutters, "He's better than last year's guy." That one caught fire. You step back half a pace. A man dressed as a knight, cardboard armor, too tight hose, expression of eternal optimism, stumbles into the clearing and loudly declares that he will challenge any rogue, juggler, or miscreant to a duel for the honor of the fair. The lute player throws him a radish. He accepts this as a weapon. There's no official arena, so the duel begins wherever they happen to be standing. The knight loses his shoe. The minstrel throws a cabbage. The crowd cheers. The fire eater sets down his torch and starts selling flasks of whatever he just drank. You back away, slightly overwhelmed, and duck behind a wagon piled with straw dolls. They all have painted faces and little cloaks, and the seller insists they protect against storms, rats, and emotional despair. You buy one because it looks judgmental, and you respect that. A stray cat brushes against your ankle, then leaps onto the pie stall like it owns the place. The vendor doesn't react. "He's in charge of quality control," she says. The cat licks a pigeon pie and falls asleep. You find a quietish corner near a crooked fence, and watch as a group of minstrels now argues about which of them is the true heir to the fair song, whatever that means. A nearby woman dips strips of cloth into a bucket of red dye and begins tying them around people's wrists. "Good luck," she says, and keeps fleas away. You wonder if she's lying. You tie one on anyway. One last vendor catches your eye, a man selling carved spoons shaped like various saints. One spoon has a suspiciously long nose. "That one's Saint Anestus," the man says without blinking. "Helps with lies." You ask how. He says, "It stirs the truth out of you." You don't press. As you wander back toward the center of the fair, your ears ringing from clashing melodies and clashing egos, you realize something odd. You haven't seen a single coin change hands. Not clearly, anyway. It's all trades, nods, subtle gestures. Maybe you paid for those walnuts with a smile. Maybe you owe someone a favor now. Maybe you're the entertainment. One of the jesters walks by and yells, "You've got cabbage on your shoe." You look down. You don't. He laughs anyway. You laugh too. That's how these things go. And somewhere, not far off, the goat has escaped again. You don't chase it. You've learned your lesson. You're still brushing imaginary cabbage off your shoe, thanks, jester, when something darts past your leg. A flash of fur, a glint of metal, and a shout in the distance. You turn just in time to see a man wearing what can only be described as a bathrobe with bells chasing a ferret. Or maybe the ferret's chasing him. It's hard to tell. The creature is on a leash, kind of, and wearing a tiny ruffled collar. Of course it is. The man waves his arms dramatically. "Ladies and gents, a marvel. The one, the only, Ambrose the acrobat ferret." You blink slowly. Someone claps. A few curious onlookers circle around as Ambrose scampers up a stack of crates, and then immediately knocks over a jar of honey. It shatters with flair. The man sighs and says, "He's not a morning ferret." That earns a few sympathetic chuckles. The man digs into his satchel, pulls out a tiny hoop wrapped in faded ribbon, and whistles. The ferret freezes, pivots like a furry ballerina, and leaps cleanly through the hoop. Cheers erupt. A child gasps. You're weirdly moved. You glance around and realize the spontaneous stage has become a magnet for the other oddballs of the fair. A juggler with soot-smudged cheeks joins in, balancing what appear to be dried fish. Then a woman in patchwork robes twirls through the crowd on stilts, brushing the tops of tents with her ridiculous hat. A dog with a monocle, you don't ask, sits beside a barrel, stoically guarding what you hope isn't mead. Nearby, a barefoot man is making shadow puppets against a canvas wall and narrating a tragic love story between a fox and a moonbeam. You get the sense he didn't rehearse. This is the unofficial entertainment district of the fair, chaotic, unlicensed, and deeply committed to confusing your senses. It smells of roasted chestnuts, sweat, and just a hint of singed beard hair. You're not sure whose. Historians still argue whether these wandering performers were considered valuable artists or tolerated nuisances. Town records from the period often list them somewhere between chicken thieves and cloud readers, a category no one has successfully defined. The ferret man now attempts a grand finale. He stacks 3 wooden cups, places Ambrose on top, and gently pokes the bottom one with a stick. The tower teeters. A collective gasp. A sneeze. The tower topples. The ferret lands on the juggler's head, steals a dried fish, and vanishes into the crowd like a furry legend. The audience erupts in laughter, and coins finally appear, small copper pieces tossed onto a flattened cloth on the ground. The ferret man bows so deeply you worry for his spine. You weave away from the crowd and pause by a booth that's selling musical instruments made entirely from vegetables. A woman demonstrates a carrot flute. It sounds exactly like a kazoo choking on a dream. You pretend to be impressed. A passing monk eyes the instrument with suspicion. Music should elevate the soul, he mutters. The woman replies, it elevates the carrot, and to her credit, he has no comeback. Just ahead, two jesters are locked in a fierce battle of insults. No weapons, just words, and a suspiciously sharp wit. You walk like a goose that's lost faith in its purpose, one snaps. At least I wasn't born with my brain in my knees. The other fires back. The crowd cheers. A third jester shows up, declares them both duller than unbuttered bread, and drops his trousers. Not completely, just enough to remind everyone this is technically still comedy. There's a brief scuffle over who gets to win, and eventually they decide to settle it the medieval way, with a competitive chicken impersonation. You've never heard so many adults clucking with such commitment. A child in the front row begins crying. A chicken joins the circle, clearly offended. Someone nearby leans over and whispers, "Last year, they had a leper mime. Didn't speak, but made you cry." You're not sure how to respond to that. A fire breather passes by, eyes slightly singed, looking for a new spot to perform. You see his torch is out, but the smoke curling from his beard says the risk level remains high. A man with a snake around his neck mutters a blessing, and hands him a green apple. No explanation. Just vibes. You're beginning to notice a pattern. The line between performance and accident is blurry at best. One woman spins flaming hoops, but it's unclear if she meant to light her sleeve. A boy chases his own hat, which is being blown in theatrical arcs by the wind. A pig wanders into the scene wearing what looks like chainmail. No one questions it. A nearby sign reads, "Oracle of the Snails." Beneath it, an elderly woman with a magnifying glass watches a snail crawl across a marked wooden board. You step closer. "Ask a question," she says. The snail will answer. You think for a moment. "Will it rain tomorrow?" She points to the square the snail just touched. It says, "Almost definitely, unless it doesn't." You nod solemnly. That tracks. The crowd begins shifting again, buzzing with the promise of something called the cheese-rolling duel, and you make a mental note to investigate later. But for now, the sun is dipping slightly, throwing long shadows across the fair, and the strange little corner you've been exploring feels like a dream within a dream. A very loud, slightly sticky dream. You wander past a final act, a woman balancing a spinning plate on her head while reciting bawdy limericks in 4 languages. Her dog plays a tiny drum. It's unclear whether this is intentional. You sit for a moment on a crate marked onions, possibly cursed, and breathe in the warm air, thick with sawdust, honey, and echoes of applause. Somewhere, a man is attempting to hypnotize a chicken. Somewhere else, a juggler is being carried off by the ferret. And you're just a tiny part of the strangest theater in Europe, where the ticket price is a blink, a breath, and the willingness to be confused. You hear the cheese before you see it. Well, to be fair, you hear the crowd reacting to the cheese. Cheers, groans, and the kind of unhinged laughter that only follows a near-death experience involving dairy. You make your way toward the source, weaving past a man covered in chalk dust and a pair of arguing bakers throwing handfuls of flour at each other like it's a snowball fight from hell. Then you see it. At the top of a modest, sloping hill, a glorified bump really, sits a large, slightly lopsided wheel of cheese. Below it, 2 groups of men, each in matching tunics with hastily painted emblems. One has a crudely drawn wedge of cheese. The other, inexplicably, has what looks like an angry cow. Between them stands the judge, or referee, or possibly just a very loud blacksmith who drew the short straw. He's holding a horn and a suspiciously tiny flag. Welcome to the cheese-rolling duel. Historians still argue over whether this event originated as a sacred ritual tied to fertility or a result of extreme boredom mixed with dairy surplus. Some say it dates back to pagan festivals honoring the harvest gods. Others say someone just once tripped while carrying cheese downhill, and the crowd made it a tradition. You settle near a woman selling mugs of something warm and suspiciously viscous. "Herbal broth," she claims. "It smells like mint and old boot." You take a polite sip and pretend not to gag. Up on the hill, the blacksmith raises his arms. The crowd hushes. He bellows, 3, 2, 1. Throw the cheese. The wheels are released. They wobble, bounce, and begin their perilous descent, one veering hard left, the other making surprisingly graceful arcs like a ballerina having an existential crisis. Then come the runners. 2 men from each team launch themselves down the hill after the cheeses. Arms flailing, legs tangled, one immediately eats dirt and rolls the rest of the way like a human turnip. The crowd erupts in laughter. Someone shouts, "He lost a shoe in his dignity." The faster cheese makes it to the bottom first, crashing into a hay bale that doesn't do its job. A child yelps. The cheese survives. The winning runner, mud-caked, bruised, and victorious, hoists the cheese above his head like a golden trophy. It immediately slips from his grasp and knocks over a barrel of radishes. You clap. Everyone claps. Even the losing team claps, mostly out of relief that no one lost teeth this year. A bard begins composing a song on the spot. It rhymes cheese with knees and fleas. He gets applause anyway. A boy beside you turns and says, "Last year, a man ran into a goose and the goose won." You nod. That checks out. The blacksmith declares the cheese legally edible, which is a thing now, apparently. Chunks are sliced and passed around. You accept one. It smells like triumph and questionable refrigeration. You eat it anyway. It's not bad. The losers, not wanting to leave in shame, challenge the winners to a rematch. But this time, brace yourself, they suggest uphill. The crowd gasps. Someone faints. A monk starts praying. You don't stay for the rematch. You've seen enough chaos for one afternoon, and your legs still ache from yesterday's potato toss of St. Bridget. Long story. You follow the footpath toward the quieter side of the fair, the shrine rows, the herbal booths, the turnip fortune tellers. But first, you pass a man in chainmail trying to juggle 3 wheels of cheese. It's going poorly. You duck into a narrow alley between 2 merchant stalls, one selling pewter buttons shaped like animals, the other hawking truth-revealing crystals. A woman tries to sell you a gem that glows under moonlight, but only if you believe. You tell her you've believed 6 times today, and have nothing left to give. She gives you a rock anyway. The air is thick now with the smell of dust, old wood, and burning herbs. A group of fair-goers sits in a circle, discussing the results of the cheese match as if it were an epic duel of knights. The arc on that cheddar was poetry, one says. But that Gouda madness. You settle on a bench near the herb stall and exhale slowly, the chaotic joy of the event still buzzing in your bones. A small child runs by yelling, "I touched the cheese. I touched it." A goat follows. You glance toward the field. The cheese-rolling hill is empty again, dotted only with smushed grass and the occasional dropped glove. But the energy lingers, like laughter echoing through wood beams, like the kind of tradition that survives precisely because no one really understands why it started. And isn't that most of history? You lean back, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun on your face. Someone somewhere starts a slow clapping rhythm. A dog barks in time. A lute joins in reluctantly. You smile. Because today, you watched grown adults chase dairy down a hill like it was the Holy Grail. And for a few ridiculous minutes, it absolutely was. You wander down a path fringed with crooked carts and wilting bunting, led more by curiosity than direction. Somewhere behind you, the cheers of the cheese duel still echo, faint and joyful. But up ahead, something different is unfolding, something slower, quieter, stranger. The crowd here is smaller, hushed. People shuffle respectfully around a tiny wooden structure, half booth, half shrine. Draped in faded cloth and bedecked with wildflowers, it smells like beeswax, mildew, and faintly cabbage. And there, at the center of it all, nestled on a velvet cushion in a glass case, sits a turnip. Yes, a turnip. It's not a particularly large turnip. Not unusually shaped. Slightly shriveled, honestly. But make no mistake, this is no ordinary root vegetable. This is the blessed turnip of St. Mildred. And people have come from miles around to stare at it. A woman nearby clutches her hands to her chest and whispers, "I heard it cured hiccups, just by being near it." Another insists her cousin's rash cleared up after a dream about it. A boy claims it made his chickens lay bigger eggs. You lean in, inspecting the turnip for signs of divinity. It blinks at you. Just kidding, it's a turnip. The man tending the shrine wears a robe stitched with embroidered vegetables, carrots, onions, what might be a suspiciously aggressive parsnip. He nods solemnly as you approach. "Do you wish to leave an offering?" he asks. His voice is gentle, like he spent years whispering to root crops. You glance at the small basket beside the case. It holds a silver ring, a braid of hair, a spoon, and a half-eaten oat cake. You offer a walnut you forgot you bought. He accepts it with great reverence. Historians still argue whether relics like this were real focal points of belief or elaborate fairground pranks that spiraled out of control. Certainly, local clergy often discouraged the veneration of unofficial saints like Mildred the Moist, but once a story takes root, pardon the pun, it tends to grow. According to the legend scrawled on a parchment nailed to the booth's frame, Saint Mildred was a 9th century nun who once fed a starving village entirely with a single turnip. How she did this is left vague. One version involves a miracle. Another involves clever stew rotation. A third, popular with children, says the turnip never got any smaller, no matter how many times you bit it. At some point, someone, likely an opportunistic fairgoer, claimed to have found the original holy turnip buried near an old monastery wall. Whether that's true or not, the exhibit now travels from fair to fair, gathering both skeptics and believers like bees to an onion. You step back as a woman approaches the case with tears in her eyes and places a withered thistle at its base. She whispers, "For my mother's knees," and bows. Behind the shrine, a man sells blessed turnip extract in tiny glass vials. "For strength, clarity, and pleasant breath," he announces. You ask what's in it. He squints. "Mostly rainwater and faith." You buy one. Why not? It might taste like pond, but the placebo effect is undefeated. As you move on, a group of pilgrims passes you, humming a slow chant. They wear matching tunics, each painted with a large turnip and the words "Mildred protects." One of them has a pet duck on a leash. The duck quacks in time with the chant. You overhear a scholar-looking man arguing with a merchant. "There is no textual evidence that Mildred even existed," he insists. The merchant shrugs. "That turnip cured my gout." Debate over. You sit for a moment on a nearby bench shaped like a large potato. You assume it's a potato. Could be a very tired yam. A boy offers you a candle shaped like the blessed turnip. You decline politely. He offers you a candle shaped like Saint Mildred herself. She looks suspiciously like someone's aunt. You buy it anyway. Just behind the shrine, you find a quieter booth, a woman selling turnip-themed poetry. She recites one without being asked. "O humble bulb of soil-born grace, in darkness grown with waxy face, you fed a saint, they say, or 3, and now you live in glass, not pea." You clap. She bows. Her hat falls off. No one mentions it. As the sun shifts in the sky, casting warm gold onto the shrine, you realize something odd. People want to believe. Whether or not the turnip ever fed a village or glowed during a thunderstorm, it now holds meaning simply because enough people have chosen to see it as sacred. Maybe that's all it takes, a good story, a bit of faith, and the willingness to carry a root vegetable on a velvet pillow through 6 counties. A child tugs at your sleeve. "If you close your eyes and make a wish near it, it comes true," she whispers. You smile and close your eyes. You don't wish for gold or glory. You just wish your feet would stop aching. And maybe, just maybe, for one more piece of that blessed cheese. You open your eyes. The child's gone. The crowd thins. The sun inches lower. The man in the embroidered robe replaces the case's cloth cover with delicate care. "We rest the turnip at dusk," he says, like it's a living thing. Maybe in a way it is. You take one last look at the tiny, unimpressive, possibly miraculous vegetable, and you feel a kind of peace. Not because it's magic, but because, like so many strange things at this fair, it reminds you that even the most ordinary parts of life can become extraordinary when shared, celebrated, and slightly exaggerated. You walk away from the shrine with the faint smell of waxy root vegetables still lingering in your nostrils, and your blessed turnip extract tucked carefully into your pouch. Whether it works or not, you feel mildly protected. Possibly placebo, possibly Mildred. Just a few tenths over, the mood changes entirely. You hear the clink of glass bottles, the low hum of whispered transactions, and the unmistakable aroma of something sweet and syrupy, and a little alarming. It's the fair's unofficial apothecary row, a winding corridor of booths, draped in moth-eaten linens, crowded with shelves of herbs, vials, dried lizards, and what may or may not be legal under medieval law. You're met almost immediately by a man with a pointed beard and a gleam in his eye. "Looking for love?" he asks. You blink. He leans closer. Or perhaps a little revenge? You've barely formed a reply when he produces a small bottle from a hidden sleeve. It's pink. It sparkles. It smells like cloves and disappointment. "Love potion," he says with great drama. "1 drop, and they'll stare at you like you're made of honey and sin." You ask what's in it. He pauses. "Mainly fermented beet juice and saffron. But the label is very convincing." You consider it. Historians still argue whether medieval love potions ever had real physiological effects, or whether they simply made people believe enough to act on feelings they already had. Either way, there's a long and sticky history of roots, herbs, and very questionable liquids being peddled as romance in a bottle. You sidestep his offer and continue browsing. Another stall promises guaranteed passion or your dowry back. It displays an impressive array of jars labeled with names like Lustroot, Devil's Parsnip, and St. Agatha's Whimsy. One contains what looks suspiciously like dried frogs. The vendor insists they're spiritually active. You nod solemnly. Of course they are. A woman at the next booth wears a shawl made of what appears to be squirrel tails and speaks only in riddles. You ask if she has anything for confidence. She replies, "Only the sky can answer that." She hands you a sachet of lavender and ash and tells you to sleep with it under your goat. You don't have a goat. She doesn't seem concerned. Further down, an elderly man with a crooked back offers something called Knight's Courage Elixir. You inquire about side effects. He says, occasional singing and mild arrogance. You're intrigued. You hear a commotion to your left. A younger apothecary, barely old enough to shave, is arguing with a woman wearing 5 layers of shawls. She accuses him of selling fake fertility herbs. He replies, "Ma'am, I told you nettle root is not magic. Just pointy. The air is thick with strange scents, rosemary, musty leather, a trace of vinegar." Somewhere a pigeon coos ominously. You pause at a booth with a velvet curtain and a single bottle displayed on a silk pillow. No name. No price. Just a hand-painted tag that reads, "Do not drink without moonlight." You're tempted. Deeply tempted. But instead, you settle on a small tin of herbal lozenges labeled for night whispers and mild regret. You're not sure what that means, but it feels on brand. Just beyond the tents, a group of women has gathered near a communal fire, passing around mugs and quietly comparing love charms. One holds up a tiny doll with a lock of hair stitched into its chest. "It worked," she says with a smirk. "He cried during milking yesterday." A girl beside her clutches a necklace made of dried rose petals and murmurs, "Mine hasn't worked yet, but I think he looked at me during Mass." Encouragement all around. You sit at the edge of the fire, letting the warmth chase the chill from your hands. Someone offers you a sip of their mulled drink. It tastes like apple cider, cloves, and something sharp. You don't ask. A woman with bright eyes and crooked teeth leans toward you, holding out a tiny scroll. "This," she says, "is a recipe for the Bold Heart Tonic. It's only been banned twice." You take it carefully. The ingredients include wild thyme, river mint, a red feather, unspecified bird, and something called moon-blessed dew. There are no measurements. Just vibes. You tuck it into your cloak. Maybe one day you'll try it. Or maybe it'll be a souvenir of this strange, smoky corner of the fair where belief is sold by the bottle and mystery is measured in drops. Just as you're about to stand, a soft voice calls, "Would you like a reading?" You turn. A fortune teller, veiled in lace, beckons you into a corner tent. Candles flicker inside. You hesitate, but only for a second. Inside, the air is sweet with myrrh and mystery. She doesn't ask your name. She just takes your hand, traces a finger across your palm, and says, "You carry a question you haven't spoken yet." You raise an eyebrow. "Accurate." She continues, "Someone waits for you, though they don't yet know it." You glance toward the tent flap, half expecting some lovesick stable hand to wander in. She smiles gently, as if reading your thoughts. Love comes in stranger forms than we expect. Sometimes through chance. Sometimes through charm. Sometimes through fermented beet juice. You laugh. She presses a small charm into your palm, a smooth stone with a spiral etched into it. "For dreams," she says, "and decisions." You step out into the fading light, the wind softer now, the world tinged with amber and possibility. A bell rings in the distance, signaling the next event. But for now you pause. You feel lighter. Not because the potions worked, but because you let yourself believe they might. You're just about to follow the faint sound of bagpipes toward what smells suspiciously like roasted onions when a sudden cheer rises from the other end of the fair. A different kind of cheer. Not the joyful squeal of someone catching a roasted chestnut midair, but the slow-building roar of people hungry for spectacle. You follow it. Soon you find yourself pressed into the edges of a growing circle. In the center stands a stage, or at least something pretending to be one. It's built from barrels, planks, and one large overturned washtub. Atop it, 2 jesters bow to opposite sides of the crowd, both wearing ridiculous hats and expressions of exaggerated smugness. One sports striped leggings and a tunic that looks like it lost an argument with a paintbrush. The other wears what can only be described as a cape made of rags and misplaced confidence. The sign behind them reads, "Royal Insult Contest, may the worst mouth win." You grin. This is going to be good. A man with a wooden spoon for a scepter steps forward. He's the referee, self-appointed probably, and declares in a booming voice, "Let the slanderous slinging commence." The crowd hoots. A child yells, "Make him cry." Someone else offers a pickled egg as a prize. The first jester steps forward and bows with dramatic flair. Then, with a grin sharp enough to cut bread, he begins. Your face, dear rival, is like a medieval map, confusing, wrinkled, and full of dragons. The crowd roars. The second jester doesn't flinch. He steps forward, squints thoughtfully, then fires back. I'd compare your wit to a turnip, but at least the turnip gets picked. You wince. Even the blessed turnip Booth feels that one. Historians still argue whether medieval jesters were true satirists, poking at power from within the system, or simply licensed fools tolerated so long as they danced and insulted just the right amount. What's clear is that they were often the only people who could speak hard truths aloud and wrap them in laughter. The insult volley continues. Jester 1. You smell like a candle made of goat's sorrow. Jester 2. Your breath could curdle mead, and that's already curdled. Someone throws a shoe. It's unclear if it's part of the show. Then a sudden twist. Jester 1 whips out a scroll, dramatically unrolls it, and begins reading what he calls a poem for my opponent's socks. It's 2 lines long and includes the phrase marinated disappointment. The crowd shrieks. Jester 2 retaliates with a limerick involving fleas, unrequited affection, and an unfortunate misunderstanding involving a beehive. You notice some of the crowd now openly weeping with laughter. One woman clutches her husband and whispers, "That's the best insult I've heard since the turnip prophecy." Her husband nods solemnly, dabbing his eyes with his sleeve. Then the unthinkable happens. Jester 1 fumbles his comeback. He starts to speak, pauses, and then hesitates. A moment of silence. The crowd gasps. Jester 2 steps forward slowly, extends his arms to the heavens, and proclaims, "Behold, the only thing emptier than your brain, your timing." Oof. Jester 1 collapses onto a hay bale, dramatically defeated. Someone hands him a cabbage as consolation. The referee declares Jester 2 the winner, but both performers take a bow. And somehow the crowd claps for them equally. Because here, losing doesn't matter. It's the sting well delivered, that earns respect. You wander away, cheeks sore from smiling, and find yourself thinking about words. How they wound, how they dance, how they soften or sharpen depending on the mouth that flings them. You're still mulling over Candle Made of Goat's Sorrow, when you bump into a cart stacked high with bread loaves shaped like animals. One of them is a rooster. It looks confused. You pick up a tiny loaf shaped like a hedgehog and the baker says, "That one's lucky. Unless you eat it backward." You don't ask what that means. You're afraid of the answer. Nearby, a friar hands out pamphlets titled, "How Not to Be a Fool." The jesters take 3 each. One wears his as a hat. As you nibble your hedgehog bread, carefully from the front, you hear someone repeating one of the insults from earlier. Marinated disappointment. It's already becoming legend. This, too, is part of the fair's magic. Nothing here stays still. A joke becomes a chant becomes a song, and by dusk, someone will be selling turnip charms engraved with goat sorrow. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to live. You find a quiet bench near the edge of the stage. One of the jesters passes by, no longer performing, just a man in floppy shoes sipping cider from a wooden mug. He looks at you, winks, and says, "Words are weapons, love, but only fools aim to kill." Then he stumbles into a bucket and vanishes behind a curtain. And honestly, that might be the most profound thing you hear all day. You're just beginning to recover from the verbal bruising of the insult duel, still chuckling about goat sorrow, when a distant, rhythmic thumping pulls your attention deeper into the fair. It's not drumming exactly, but something heavier, slower. Like someone trying to clap with 2 sacks of flour. Or possibly pause. You round a crooked booth selling pickled radishes and see the source. A large, lumbering bear, brown, shaggy, and unmistakably bored, standing upright on its hind legs, paw raised as if mid-curtsy. Yes, a bear. It's wearing a tattered floral wreath around its neck and appears to be swaying gently in place. You're not sure if it's dancing or just reconsidering all its life choices. Either way, the crowd is enraptured. The bear's handler, a wiry man in boots that look like they were once part of a church roof, plays a hurdy-gurdy and shouts, Dance, Beatrice. Dance like your soul depends on it. Beatrice blinks once. Slowly. Then she raises her paw in pirouettes, lumbers in a large circle. The crowd applauds. A friar at the edge of the group clutches a rosary and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they cheer." But even he can't help cracking a tiny smile when the bear does a sort of half-squat and sneezes on command. You step closer. Beatrice, despite her formidable size, is oddly graceful. She moves like a grandmother who used to be a ballerina, but now dances only when the right music plays. Her handler tosses her a treat, a lump of what might be honey and oats, and Beatrice devours it with a satisfied grunt. Historians still argue about the morality of bear dancing in medieval Europe. On one hand, it was undeniably popular, entertainment for the masses. On the other hand, even medieval monks occasionally protested its cruelty, noting that no creature of God was made to waltz for copper coins. Still, bear dancers were common, traveling from fair to fair, hoping for a few coins and a bit of attention. Some even claimed their bears could speak by pawing at letters. Others trained them to bow, pray, or imitate noblemen walking with sore knees. Beatrice's next act involves holding a tambourine in her mouth while the handler skips around her like a giddy squirrel. It's surreal. Then comes the awkward moment. The handler declares Beatrice will now bless the crowd. He bows, places his cap over his heart, and says, "She senses your sins. One slap, one redemption." The crowd falls silent. You, unfortunately standing near the front, are the first recipient. Beatrice ambles forward, raises her paw, and gently bops you on the head. It's not painful, more like being nudged by a pillow that's seen some things. The crowd cheers. You nod graciously. A woman nearby claps you on the back and says, "You're clean now. Spiritually, I mean. Not your cloak." You glance down. She's not wrong. After Beatrice finishes her rounds, blessing, sneezing, and dramatically collapsing on a blanket, the handler bows and passes around a battered hat. Coins clink in. A few children toss in berries. One person, for reasons no one questions, offers a small spoon. You linger a while, watching Beatrice lie in the shade, licking honey off her paw and ignoring the world. It's hard not to feel a pang of respect for her. In a fair full of jesters and geese and turnip shrines, she might be the most dignified participant here. And yet, there's a strange tension. Not far from the performance circle, a group of friars stands in a huddle, murmuring. One of them gestures sharply at Beatrice, then at the handler. Another shakes his head, muttering something about mocking creation. You move closer just in time to catch a phrase. It is a beast of the Lord, not a jester of men. Strong words. Especially in a place where people just applauded a duck walking backwards. The handler, sensing the shift, bows quickly and ushers Beatrice away, muttering thanks and apologies as they vanish behind a tent with the words, "Dancing Wonders and Other Marvels," painted in shaky red script. You sit on a hay bale, watching the crowd dissipate, still buzzing about the performance. A child reenacts the bear's dance while his mother tries to explain, gently, that no, they cannot adopt one. You lean back and think about how strange it all is. A bear, in a wreath, in a clearing surrounded by people who still believe a turnip cured the plague. You wonder, is it cruel? Is it wonder? Can it be both? That's the thing about medieval fairs, they're never just one thing. They're wonder and weariness, magic and mud, joy and just the faintest twinge of something else. Something heavier. A reminder that for all its laughter, the fair still belongs to a world where survival is hard and distraction is sacred. You stand, stretch your legs, and prepare to head toward the food stalls. Something fried is calling your name. Maybe eel. Maybe turnip again. Who knows? But as you pass the last booth, you catch a glimpse of Beatrice again, resting peacefully under a tree. A small girl sits beside her, humming a tune you don't recognize. Beatrice listens, eyes half closed, as if she's dreaming of pine forests and quiet rivers. You keep walking, but a part of you stays behind, with the bear who danced and the girl who sang and a moment that, just briefly, felt like peace. You follow your nose next. It's pulling you towards something rich, something savory, something undeniably greasy. And as you round the edge of the fire pit circle, you see it, the infamous pig wrestling ring. If ring is the right word for a soggy pen made of hay bales and loosely woven rope. The crowd's already thick, elbows flying, cheers rising. You squeeze into a spot between a baker covered in flour and a butcher waving a sausage like a scepter. Both are yelling for different pigs. Yes, there are multiple pigs. A man in a wide-brimmed hat announces the rules. Not that anyone's listening. You get 1 minute. Grab the pig. Lift it clear. You win. Probably. No biting. From humans, that is. The pig makes no promises. The crowd laughs. A goat bleats. A pig escapes momentarily and is tackled gently by an elderly woman with surprising reflexes. The ringmaster calls for the next brave soul. To your horror, someone shouts your name. Or something that sounds like it. Too late to clarify. The crowd parts. You're pushed forward, cloak billowing, feet squishing into a mix of straw and something you refuse to identify. The pig snorts. You stare at it. It stares back. Mutual distrust. It's not particularly large, but it's fast. And alarmingly greasy. You suspect it's been intentionally greased, like an eel with legs. The handler grins and whispers, good luck. He bit a friar last week. You nod grimly. The bell rings. You lunge. The pig jukes left. You slip, regain balance, and manage to grab a hind leg. For half a second, you feel victorious, until the pig twists, squeals like a banshee, and drags you through a puddle of something warm and humbling. The crowd goes wild. You make another attempt, arms flailing, dignity leaking from every seam. Your fingers brush its belly. It wriggles like a slippery miracle and darts behind you. You pivot, arms out like a scarecrow trying to hug a storm. At last you catch it, sort of wrap both arms around its midsection and lift. Half an inch. Maybe. The bell clangs. Time's up. You collapse backward into a pile of hay, heart pounding, hands smelling of pig and penance. The pig, thoroughly unbothered, trots to the edge of the ring and poops in protest. The judge approaches. That was spirited, he says, not unkindly. You are awarded half a meat pie and a ribbon that reads, Participant Honorary. You limp out of the ring to polite applause and one enthusiastic chicken. Historians still argue whether pig wrestling was genuinely traditional, or just one of those things fairs invented to pass the time and humiliate strangers. Some scholars trace it to pagan fertility rites involving animals and strength. Others suggest it was just a bet gone too far. One record from 1273 simply reads, Man bit pig. Pig won. You brush yourself off and hand your ribbon to a child nearby, who squeals with delight and runs off shouting, I'm a hero. You feel oddly proud. The butcher pats your shoulder. You've got promise, he says. With a few more falls, you could go pro. You laugh weakly and thank him with your last bit of energy. Nearby, the next match begins. A local lad with biceps bigger than sense leaps into the ring with war cries and wild eyes. The pig stands its ground. You decide to not watch. Instead, you drift toward a nearby stall selling warm cider in clay cups. The woman behind the counter nods kindly and slides you one before you even ask. You've got straw in your hair, she says, handing you a damp cloth. You sit on a bench, sip slowly, and feel the world soften around the edges. The pig squeals again in the distance. This time, it sounds like victory. The cider is spiced, apple, nutmeg, and a hint of something herbal. You sigh. Your cloak is damp. Your knees ache. But there's laughter all around, and for the first time in a while, you feel fully present. You strike up a conversation with the cider vendor. Her name's Ellen. She's been coming to the fair every year since she was 10. Saw a man once, she says, proposed to his sweetheart right in the pig ring. He lost 2 teeth that day. You ask pig or man. She just smiles. As twilight creeps in, lanterns are lit, little ones dangling from booths and large ones strung across the walkways like captured stars. A soft music drifts in from the distance, flutes, tambourines, maybe even a hurdy-gurdy again. You walk toward the sound, cider in hand, ribbon now tucked inside your tunic like a medal of honor. The fair feels different now. Warmer, slower. Less chaotic and more enchanted. A passing troubadour strums his lute and sings a tune that includes the line, and the knight who fought the swine was braver than the king. You tip your cup toward him in salute, and somewhere, behind a faded blue curtain, the pig is probably sipping cider too, already a legend in its own right. Your knees are still humming from the pig duel, your cloak smells faintly of cider and hay, and your fingers, despite several wipes, retain the unmistakable musk of heroic livestock. But none of that matters now, because the fair has entered its next phase, the great sack race. Which sounds innocent enough. Sack races are for children, right? A few hops, a tumble, some laughter? Not here. This, it turns out, is the medieval open sack race tournament, complete with brackets, heckling, a goblet-shaped trophy made of bark, and more cheating than you've seen since the Guess the Goose Weight scandal of 2 hours ago. You arrive just as a man in yellow leggings tries to hide a second foot under someone else's sack. A referee catches him. The referee is 12 years old and wields a stick like it's Excalibur. "Disqualified for double footery," he shouts, and the crowd erupts. You're offered a place in the race by a woman who's clearly in it to win. She smiles sweetly and whispers, "I tripped the others." You bounce. "We split the prize." You politely decline. She winks and hops away. The contestants gather. The sacks? Burlap, stiff, possibly ancient. One has property of Lord Monk stitched into it. Another has a hole big enough to reveal someone's prized shin tattoo, what might be a radish or an angry eel. The whistle blows. And suddenly chaos. Hopping, tripping, yelling, sacks flying, knees colliding, spectators dodging airborne participants. You spot one man, possibly a blacksmith, simply running with the sack tied around his neck like a cape. A woman throws a cabbage at him. It connects. He goes down. A sack bursts. Flour everywhere. A goat bolts through the chaos, somehow wins the first heat, and is immediately disqualified for not being bipedal. You lean against a post and watch with giddy confusion. It's not really about winning. It's about surviving, or at least doing so with your tunic intact. Historians still argue whether these types of competitions served as harmless village fun or thinly disguised mating rituals. One record from 1348 describes a sack race where the prize was a pig and a kiss from the baker's daughter, who, by all accounts, was less than thrilled. In today's race, the prize is a bag of almonds and a hand-painted spoon. No one seems entirely sure why. The spoon reads, "Leap like a saint. Land like a fool." As the final race begins, you notice something odd. A man at the far end is clearly gliding. He's not hopping. He's sliding. You squint. Someone nearby whispers, "He greased the inside of his sack." Another gasps, "With lard from the pie tent." Scandal. Spectacle. A scandalous spectacle. The crowd surges forward, booing, cheering, laughing. The man slides to victory, arms raised in triumph, only to be met by the 12-year-old referee. "Sir," the boy says gravely, "you've been found slippery." The man feigns outrage. "That's just my natural stride." The crowd howls. A dog howls. The goat from earlier howls. No one knows how. Ultimately, the prize goes to a girl who tripped 3 times, rolled into a bush, emerged with leaves in her hair, and crossed the finish line backward. She's hoisted onto a makeshift pedestal and given the spoon, which she immediately uses to eat someone else's pudding. Justice. You find yourself seated again, this time beside a boy no older than 10, holding a very serious-looking ledger. You ask what he's doing. "Recording infractions," he says. You peek over. The list includes excessive hopping, goat interference, weaponized carrot, over-celebrating. You nod. Fair. A woman walks by selling ribbons that say, "I tried to sack, but I snack." You buy one and pin it to your cloak like a badge of honor. Suddenly, the baker's son arrives carrying a tray of mini pies. "Victory treats," he calls. They're shaped like sacks. One is still steaming. You take a bite. It's filled with something sweet and savory, possibly fig, definitely mystery. You wander away as the crowd shifts again, already forming around the next event. But before you go, you pass by the 12-year-old referee, now seated on a barrel, wiping his brow. He looks up and says, "Best one yet." You ask, "The race?" "No," he grins. "That goat." You laugh. The goat wins again. And in this place, where cheating is expected, flour is fashion, and the best athletes are four-legged, who can argue with that? The sun now hangs low like a golden lantern, casting long, theatrical shadows across the trampled fairground. You shuffle along, past vendors selling braids of garlic, pockets full of pebbles labeled wizard stones, and one very exhausted jester trying to sell his own hat. But what draws your eye now is a small sign, hand-painted and crooked, nailed to a plank near the poultry pens. The second annual Ugliest Rooster competition, prizes and regret await. You pause. You read it again. Your legs take you forward before your brain finishes objecting. Soon, you're standing in a dusty clearing surrounded by hay bales arranged into an uneven viewing gallery. In the center, a pen. And inside that pen, several deeply unfortunate-looking roosters. The first is missing most of its tail feathers and walks like it owes someone money. The second has a beak that curves like a fishhook and eyes that seem to stare directly into your soul. The third. You swear it's not a rooster at all, but some sort of feathered cryptid. It winks. You pretend it didn't. The host, a cheerful woman wearing a tunic decorated with embroidered chickens, welcomes the crowd. Ladies, gents, and all who walk the muddy path, welcome to the beauty pageant no one asked for. She gestures to the first bird. This is Thistle. Thistle has been struck by lightning. Twice. The crowd applauds. Thistle caws like he swallowed a squeaky hinge. Next up, Harold. Harold once chased a priest into a ditch. The priest apologized. You glance over at Harold. He's pecking the corner of the fence with the casual menace of someone plotting to escape prison using only spite. Last but not least, meet Susan. Someone in the crowd whispers, "Isn't Susan a hen's name?" The host waves a hand. Susan doesn't conform to your expectations. Susan is mostly bald, except for a wild mohawk of black feathers. He struts like royalty, then promptly falls over. The crowd cheers. Historians still argue whether medieval poultry competitions like this were sincere or purely farce. Some chroniclers insist such contests were a form of local satire, mocking nobility through bird-based allegory. Others believe they were just an excuse to laugh at things that couldn't sue for defamation. You take a seat next to a woman knitting what appears to be a chicken-shaped hat. "I come every year," she says. Last time, the winner had a lazy eye and a vendetta against bells. You ask if she's ever entered a bird. She snorts. "My rooster's too handsome. He'd ruin the sport." The host calls for voting. "Shout the loudest for your champion." Thistle gets a healthy cheer. Harold inspires an enthusiastic roar, and one man throws his hat into the pen. Susan receives a standing ovation, several dramatic gasps, and a spontaneous haiku from a poet in the back. Feathers like shadows. Confidence unmatched and odd. Susan reigns tonight. You watch as Susan crows in triumph and falls over again. Poetry. The winner is declared, Susan, by a landslide. The prize? A ceremonial cabbage on a velvet cushion and a sash that reads, "The least best looking." Susan pecks the sash. Susan pecks the cabbage. Susan pecks Harold. The crowd adores it. As the birds are gently herded away, except Susan, who must be lured with raisins, you overhear a young boy ask his mother, "Can we get a rooster that ugly?" She replies, "Only if you feed it nightmares." You linger as the crowd thins. The host carefully folds the cushion and hands the leftover cabbage to a man with no teeth and a very happy expression. You suspect this is his dinner. Nearby, someone begins sketching the birds in charcoal. You lean over. Susan looks like a cloud having a crisis. It's perfect. You head toward the next row of booths, passing a friar shaking his head. "Vanity even in poultry," he mutters, though you're fairly sure you saw him cheering for Harold earlier. Just beyond the rooster ring, a group of older women is discussing whether Susan's victory was a symbol of divine irony, or simply proof that everyone loves a disaster. One suggests that Susan could be canonized. The others nod thoughtfully. You buy a souvenir pin from a local girl. It's made of wood and painted with 3 squiggly chickens under the words "ugliest wins." You wear it proudly. As you walk on, you can still hear Susan, crowing like a hero who's overcome the odds and doesn't care that he's technically lost all his feathers in the process. You smile. Because in this strange, sticky world of jesters, pigs, potions, and dancing bears, it makes perfect sense that the ugliest rooster, flawed, flailing, and magnificent, has stolen the show. And perhaps, in the heart of the medieval fair, it's not about who's the most graceful, charming, or even coherent. It's about who owns the chaos. And Susan, dear listener, owns it. You've barely left the rooster pen, still chuckling at Susan's bald swagger, when something odd catches your eye. A crowd gathers near a food stall tucked behind a curtain of ivy and drying garlic. Not because the food is strange, though it is, but because of the person trying very hard not to be recognized. It's a noble. You can tell instantly. Not by their clothes, they're wrapped in what looks like a potato sack and wearing a hat made of bundled reeds, but by their posture, their skin, their aura of someone who's never stood in a soup line or milked their own goat. He's tall, suspiciously clean, and inspecting fried turnips like they're exotic relics from a foreign planet. You edge closer. He haggles with the turnip vendor. "Yes," he says, voice deliberately nasal, "but what variety of oil did you use?" The vendor, a woman with dirt under her nails and a permanent scowl, replies, "Hot oil." He nods slowly, pretending this is a satisfactory answer. Then, reaching into the folds of his sack disguise, he fumbles for coin. A child whispers beside you, "That's Lord Edric. I saw him once at the winter feast. He wore boots with bells." You watch as Lord Edric, because yes, it's definitely him, accepts the fried turnips, sniffs them as if expecting revelation, and takes a cautious bite. His eyes widen. His disguise slips a little, and for one brief moment, he looks utterly content. Someone snaps a twig behind him. He freezes. You've seen this look before, a noble caught slumming. He glances left, right, then pulls the sack hood tighter over his ears and scuttles off toward the next booth, this one selling beet-stuffed pastries. He buys two. You're starting to suspect this is his thing. Historians still argue whether nobles actually snuck into fairs like this. There are records, vague and likely exaggerated, of royals dressing as peasants to experience the common folk. Some say it was out of boredom, others out of guilt. Or possibly like Lord Edric, they just really liked fried root vegetables. You trail him discreetly, ducking behind a crate of singing gourds. Don't ask, and watch as he tries his hand at a ring-toss game run by a man with no teeth and suspiciously agile fingers. Lord Edric misses every throw. Badly. The toothless man smiles. Try again, friend. The fair's full of miracles. Edric smiles sheepishly and hands over more coin. Then comes the true test. A peasant child recognizes him. Points. That's the dancing lord. He did the peacock jig at the midsummer feast. The crowd turns. You brace for panic. A noble exposed, amidst vendors and pigs and crumbs. But Lord Edric does something unexpected. He steps forward, clears his throat, and performs the peacock jig. Right there, in front of the turnip booth. Featherless, sack-clad, and utterly unashamed, he flaps his arms, twirls in slow circles, and finishes with a bow so dramatic you're not sure whether to clap or build a statue. The crowd bursts into applause. The toothless man hands him a prize, a wooden medallion shaped like a turnip with the words "Fair Spirit" carved into it. Lord Edric bows again, laughs, and for a moment, looks like someone who's never had to command a servant in his life. He vanishes into the crowd soon after, but the story spreads quickly. Did you see him? He danced. He bought 5 beet pies. He ate 3 before breathing. A jester nearby begins composing a ballad. O Lord Edric in sackcloth dressed, with root and pie he did invest. He danced among us, lost all pride, and left with turnip crumbs inside. You chuckle and make your way past the stalls, into a quieter corner of the fair. An elderly woman sells tiny soap carvings, angels, pigs, one suspiciously like Susan the rooster. You buy a bar shaped like a squirrel and ask what scent it is. She sniffs. Probably thyme. Or maybe regret. You accept it either way. You think back to Edric, twirling in a sack, free in a way few nobles ever allow themselves to be. Maybe that's the true magic of the fair, not just its chaos or color, but its ability to bend the rules of hierarchy for a day. Where dukes can dance, jesters can preach, and turnips can be worshipped. You sit on a bench near a shuttered booth. A candle flickers beside a basket of spent herbs. The light is soft now, the air cooler. Music drifts in from somewhere, faint flutes, laughter, bells. You sigh, lean back, and whisper, peacock jig. Because sometimes, what makes history strange isn't the wars or the kings. It's the secret dance of a noble in disguise, holding a bag of fried turnips, smiling like he's finally found home. You drift toward the quiet end of the fairground now, where the bustle thins and everything gets just a little weirder. Not weirder in the fire-breathing goose way, more in the why is that man painting a potato with berry juice and chanting kind of way. Welcome to the fringe stalls, the spiritual sideshow of the medieval fair. Here, you're no longer just dodging carts and sniffing questionable cheese. You're dodging destiny, if the fortune teller under the fluttering blue tent is to be believed. You enter her tent out of curiosity, or maybe because the outside world smells too strongly of pickled eggs. The woman behind the table doesn't look at you right away. She's busy drawing concentric circles on a parchment with what appears to be a pigeon feather dipped in ash. Sit, she says without glancing up, unless you've come to barter garlic. Then stand. You sit. She raises her head. Her eyes are sharp, her hair wild, her robe suspiciously patterned like someone's old curtains. On the table before you rests a crystal ball. A real one. Not quite as round as you'd imagined. Actually, it's more like a fogged-up fishbowl. You seek truth, she intones. Or snacks. I'm good at both. You nod solemnly. She waves a hand over the ball and whispers a chant that sounds suspiciously like the lyrics to a tavern song about goats. Then she declares, your path is clouded. But, oh yes, I see bees. Many bees. Are you a beekeeper by any chance? You blink. She grins. Just kidding. Everyone smells like bees today. It's strange, but these fortune tellers were real fixtures of fairs. And despite what modern skeptics might say, they were popular across all classes. Some used cold reading tricks, Others genuinely believed in their visions. Historians still argue whether these seers were entertainers, con artists, or something closer to therapists in disguise. Your destiny is entangled, she adds, like wet hose on laundry day. Someone you meet today will change your life. You raise an eyebrow. Oh, it might just be indigestion, she says. But still, be alert. You thank her and leave 2 coins, one real, one wooden. She'll figure that out later. Outside, the air hums with quiet strangeness. You pass a stall claiming to sell cloud powder. It's just flour in a pouch, but the merchant insists it was gathered from the sky during a thunderstorm. You don't buy it, but you do sniff it. Yep, smells like Tuesday. Next comes the tent of the relic keeper. You didn't think medieval fairs had relics, did you? They did. Or at least things claimed to be relics. A single hair from St. Mildred's dog. A cracked chalice said to cause hiccups in anyone unworthy. A twig from the original tree of knowledge. Still smells like apple, the seller boasts. You lean closer. The twig of wisdom is suspiciously pine-scented. The keeper notices your skepticism. Don't scoff. Relics are how we measure faith, he says, dramatically lighting incense with a flint that doesn't quite catch the first 5 tries. Also, this one allegedly cured a rash in 3 different villages. He points to a dusty shoe sole. What's that, you ask? The sandal of Saint Blisterfoot, he whispers. It once walked 100 miles without a sock. You politely back away. There's always been debate about relics, how real they were, how many were just random bits of trash dressed up with parchment tags and holy-sounding names. Some argue that people wanted to believe, especially during plague years or famines. Faith needed props. Even if one of those props was clearly just a goat's molar wrapped in ribbon. You pass a monk selling painted pebbles. Holy stones, he calls them. Each one blessed by a nun named Berta. You consider one, flat, round, with a faint blue dot in the center. Why the dot, you ask? She sneezed while painting. You buy it anyway. Not far from there is a circle of dancers. Not hired ones. Just people. Fairgoers swaying to music no one else seems to hear. Their leader is a man with 1 boot, a feather cape, and the undeniable charisma of someone who owns exactly 0 goats but claims 17. He spots you. Come, he says. We dance away the demons of mundane thought. You take 1 step toward the circle, just to be polite, and are immediately pulled in. The dance is not graceful. More of a swaying hop-twist maneuver. You do your best. Someone whispers, we do this every new moon. Unless it rains. Then we chant in a barn. The dancing stops as suddenly as it started. No one explains why. They just drift off into the fair like petals on breeze. You sit on a log, catching your breath. A man next to you hums softly, while carving a turnip into a likeness of what he says is his mother-in-law. You're not sure if that's love or vengeance, but either way, it's art. You realize something in that moment. All these fringe booths, these eccentric characters, they aren't sideshows. They are the show. They're the heartbeat of the fair. Not the glitz, not the banners, but the quiet chaos of everyday people craving mystery, magic, and meaning. Even if it's just from a sneezy nun stone or a foggy fishbowl prophecy. You glance down at your palm, where the holy stone still rests, cool and oddly comforting. You smile. The sun tilts westward. The fair stretches its limbs and yawns in creaks and fading song. And you think, as you watch the man beside you blow a kiss to his turnip carving, that history isn't always about kings or battles. Sometimes it's about a day when someone danced for no reason, and a stranger told you bees were in your destiny. The fair is winding down now. Not ending. Fairs don't end, they dissolve. Like dreams. The sun has sunk low enough to paint everything gold. The tents, the dusty paths, the backs of pigs who've long given up squealing. Shadows stretch like lazy cats. Laughter becomes quieter, softer, not because there's less of it, but because it no longer needs to compete with the midday noise. You walk through this golden hour, past stalls half-packed, past jesters unpainted and barefoot, past a woman asleep on a bench with a goose in her lap. This is the part no one writes about. The after. Not the grand parade, or the chicken chase, or the peacock jigging noble. But the moment after. When the music drifts like old perfume, and every step crunches with breadcrumbs and memories. You turn a corner and find a man sweeping. He's old, not with the hunched fragility of age, but with the slow dignity of someone who's seen every kind of mud. His broom is crooked. His hands are cracked. And he's humming a tune older than anyone here. You nod. He nods back. Sweepin' the stories, he says, so they don't get lost in the wind. You pause. What kind of stories? All of them, he shrugs. Lovers meeting. Coins dropping. Roosters rebelling. Boys becoming men just by failing at the hammer toss. He looks at you. Yours too. You hadn't realized you'd made one. A story. But now, as you think about the laughter, the food, the dancing noble, the weird prophecy, and the sneezy nun rock. Yes, you had. You ask him what happens to all the stories. He points to the wind. Some blow into trees. Some sleep under pillows. Some wait until someone needs them. And just like that, he goes back to sweeping. You walk further. People are packing up, wrapping fabrics, rolling barrels, counting apples. You see the fish juggler one last time, sitting on a crate, eating an actual cooked fish, and looking exhausted. You catch the faint sound of a harp. It leads you to the fire pit. Yes, the fire pit. The one where earlier someone had tried to roast a root that turned out to be a cursed shoe. Now there's only embers. And around them people. Not performers. Not merchants. Just people. Sitting in a circle. Some with ale, some with bread, all with the quiet that comes after a long, beautiful day. A girl stands. She lifts a flute. No introduction. No name. Just music. It's not flawless. It doesn't need to be. It's raw. Honest. Like the fair itself. One by one, others join in. A drum. A tambourine. A voice singing a wordless melody. And you sit. No one says you must. But you do. Because this is the real fair. Not what's bought or sold, but what's shared. The kind of thing that doesn't show up in paintings or dusty records. The part of history that lives in breath, in music, in moments. A boy passes around roasted chestnuts. A woman pours tea from a kettle balanced on a rock. Someone offers you a piece of honeycomb wrapped in leaf. You taste it. It's sweet and strange and perfect. A man near you whispers, "This is the part that never gets written down." You nod. But you're here, so you'll remember it. The music fades eventually. People sigh. Stunt. Stretch. No one says goodbye. That's not the kind of fair this is. They just go. Like smoke. You walk the path out. Past the darkened stalls, past the juggler's empty crate, past Susan the rooster, now asleep in a basket with a ribbon someone gave her. She snores faintly. At the gate, the wind picks up. And you hear it. Laughter. A whisper. The jingle of a bell. The fair's not gone. Just waiting. For the next person. For the next story. And maybe, just maybe, for you to come back. It's the morning after the fair now. And you wake up in hay. Literal hay. Your hair smells faintly of roasted parsnips, damp wool, and victory. It's not clear how you got here. Last you remember, someone handed you a sleeping cider and said it was not poison probably. That's fair life, baby. Outside the barn, the fairgrounds are nearly unrecognizable. The colors are faded. The banners sag. Stalls are half gone, like teeth from a tired smile. A man is dragging a wheelbarrow full of what used to be cabbages, and what is now a philosophical question. It's cleanup day. And weirdly, you're part of it. No one tells you to help. But someone hands you a bucket. Someone else hands you a stick. Neither object makes sense, but together, you become an elite mud scooper. You're not alone. The juggler is here, not juggling. The nun is here, humming something that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. Even the merchant who once tried to sell you a bottle of invisible perfume, spoiler, it was air, is sweeping glitter into a pouch for next year. This is the unglamorous aftermath. But it's real, and there's something oddly soothing about returning the place to its bones. You watch as tents are folded into strange geometric bundles, like medieval origami. A group of kids chase a chicken. No one's sure if it's Susan or not. A knight in partial armor is trying to pry his boot out of a mud puddle, while his squire offers deeply unhelpful commentary. One woman walks past holding a stuffed owl. You make eye contact. Neither of you say a word. That owl has seen things. Midway through the cleanup, a man arrives. Not flashy. Simple brown cloak. Carrot-colored beard. He announces, lost and found, and sets down a wooden crate. Inside, gloves, ribbons, a single sock, 3 teeth, no explanation, a flute, and a goat that may or may not be named Jeff. Everyone who passes checks the box, just in case. You don't expect to find anything. But there it is. A tiny wooden charm someone carved. The one you traded for a honey cake. It has your initials on the back. You smile. Historians still argue whether fairs were meant to be chaotic marketplaces or temporary spiritual retreats, says a voice beside you. It's the older woman from the storytelling circle. I think they were both. You nod. Because really, what else could they be? The fair wasn't just a marketplace. It was a reset button, a place to trade not just goods, but selves, where a cobbler could become a minstrel, a girl could be a sword wielder, a lonely old man could dance for the first time in 30 years. Even a rooster could become royalty, briefly and beautifully. And now it's over. But not really, because the fair never ends. It just moves, like a nomadic dream. You carry a bundle of leftover turnips to the compost heap. Along the way, someone hands you a note. It's folded into a star. Inside it says, "Same time next year?" You don't know who sent it. You don't need to, because you already know your answer. And with that, the path out of the fair appears. Not a magical glowing one, just a regular dirt road. One with footprints. Wagon tracks. Maybe hoof prints. Maybe dinosaur. No one checked. You walk. You don't look back, because you don't need to. Everything worth remembering is already humming inside your head. The songs. The smells. The weird guy with the sock puppets that screamed Latin. And of course, the rooster. Always the rooster. You head into the hills, dirt crunching under your feet. And behind you in the wind, the faint sound of laughter drifts one last time. A reminder. You were there. You lived it. And you made a story worth sweeping into the wind. Your boots are caked in dried mud now. And your thoughts? Still somewhere between the present and the echo of lute strings. As you keep walking, the fair's memory loosens its grip, but doesn't let go entirely. That's the thing about medieval fairs. They burrow into your bones like old campfire smoke and take their sweet time leaving. The road stretches ahead, rutted, uneven, occasionally haunted by the sound of a snoring goose in the bushes. You pass a cart with a broken wheel, abandoned mid-journey. Someone's drawn a smiley face on the axle in chalk. That feels about right. Soon, you reach a crossroads. There's no sign. Just an old man sitting on a rock, shelling peas with the gravity of a philosopher. You ask for directions. He looks up slowly, nods once, and says, "Go the way where the moss grows thickest." Thanks. You follow his mossy wisdom and take the left fork. Soon you pass a monastery. Not one of the big stone ones with flying buttresses and chanting. This one's modest, wooden beams, thatched roof, a garden of suspiciously aggressive cabbages. A monk waves at you. He's barefoot and has twigs in his beard. His robes smell faintly of honey. He offers you tea, and out of curiosity and a bit of dehydration, you accept. Inside, the monastery smells like beeswax and parchment. There's a tiny library, a spinning wheel, and curiously a rack of wooden masks hanging beside the door. One shaped like a boar, one like a moon, and one that might be a political statement, but also just looks like a turnip. You sit. He pours you tea in a mug shaped like a sheep. He doesn't ask your name. You don't ask his. But conversation happens anyway, soft and slow, like bees in sunlight. You talk about the fair. He nods, smiles knowingly, and says, "Ah, the season of reversal." Apparently, in many places, fairs were one of the few times when the medieval world turned upside down on purpose. A peasant could mock a bishop. A fool could be crowned. A woman could speak freely. For a few wild days, roles were worn like costumes, and truth peeked through. Historians still argue whether the world turned upside down tradition was born from chaos or from a deeper longing to challenge the natural order. The monk says, adjusting his twig beard. You sip your tea. It tastes like rosemary and something suspiciously floral. You nod. Because sometimes pretending not to be yourself is the closest you come to knowing who you are. He shows you a manuscript next. It's handwritten, on vellum that smells faintly of goat. It's a record, not of kings or wars, but of fairs. He's been compiling stories, observations, jokes, recipes, a list of lost things, entry number 83. Gertrude's temper, misplaced in 1321. He's even copied down some of the strange proclamations from fair heralds. One reads, "Let it be known that on this day, all cats shall be addressed as Sir. Any who fail to comply shall be tickled with feathers at dawn." You chuckle. He doesn't. He's dead serious. Tradition, he says, like it explains everything. Before you leave, he gives you a small token, a wax seal stamped with the image of a donkey wearing a crown. For protection, he winks. Or comedy. Often the same thing. Outside, the air has shifted. You keep walking, still cradling the sheep mug, he insisted. Soon you see smoke curling from chimneys. A village. Not your village, but someone's. As you pass through, you catch snippets of normalcy. A woman gutting fish. Children kicking a dried gourd. A man snoring face first in a wheelbarrow. You ask if they went to the fair. Some did. Some didn't. One child insists he was the fair, which raises questions no one answers. You rest at the inn. It's quiet. The hearth smells of ash and onion soup. You sit by the fire and someone, an old man with more beard than jawline, leans over and says, "You smell like roasted parsnip and regret. You've been." You smile. He smiles back, and for a moment, in that little flicker of understanding, it feels like the fair isn't over. Just sleeping, waiting, resting its feet before the next dance. The inn creaks through the night. Floorboards mutter. The wind taps on the shutters like it forgot something important. Your room upstairs is small, with a lumpy straw mattress, a chamber pot that's seen too much, and a moth the size of a spoon clinging to the rafters like it owns the place. Still cozy. You lie back, stare at the wooden ceiling, and find yourself drifting back, not just to the fair, but to the people who made it happen. Not the jesters or lords or even the vendors. The invisible hands. The ones who set it up before sunrise. The ones who packed it away long after everyone stumbled home. You picture them moving through the misty dawn, hauling ropes, raising tents, arguing over pig placement, swapping bread crusts and bad jokes. History never quite remembers these people by name, but you do now, because you saw them, heard their laughter under their breath, caught their curses when the ale barrel slipped. There was something sacred in their simplicity. Historians still argue whether fairs were orchestrated by religious institutions, royal decrees, or just bored townsfolk tired of chickens and silence. But it's hard not to think it was mostly just people being people, wanting color in their lives, wanting noise, wanting a reason to take off their shoes and dance in the mud, even if they'd regret it by Thursday. Your thoughts shift to the things that didn't quite make sense. The woman who told fortunes using moldy bread. The puppet that blinked on its own. The musician who played with no strings. The way someone whispered your name, and you never told anyone what it was. Fringe moments. Things you chalked up to fatigue or too much mead. But now, in the hush of this village inn, they echoed differently. Like maybe the fair was more than just an event. Maybe it was a place where the fabric between worlds thinned, just enough to let in a little strangeness. A little magic. Not the flashy kind with wands and dragons, but the quiet kind. The kind that leaves you blinking at dawn, wondering if that goat really did wink at you. You remember a little girl you saw near the spice stall. She was clutching a string with no kite, just running, laughing, letting the invisible thing tug her forward. When you asked her what she was flying, she smiled and whispered, "The wind's cousin." You laugh now quietly. That kind of joy, the unapologetic, makes no sense kind, that's what sticks. That's what lingers long after the carts have rolled home, and the tents have sagged back into linen heaps. Someone knocks softly at your door. You rise. It's the innkeeper. Wrinkled face. Kind eyes. A tray in hand. "Found this under your cloak," she says, offering a folded piece of parchment. You thank her, unfold it. It's a map, roughly drawn. A circle with arrows, a few odd symbols, and one curious phrase written along the bottom. Go when the moon forgets its face. You try not to overthink it. Fail spectacularly. Sleep, when it comes, is restless. You dream of wooden masks with voices. Of a feast where no one has a mouth. Of bees humming the name of a saint you've never heard of. And somewhere in the background, music. Not the kind you hear with ears, but the kind your bones remember. When you wake, the map is gone. The tray is still there, though, bread, cheese, and something pretending to be an egg. The moth is gone too. Either it moved on, or found religion in the candle wax. You eat quickly. There's no real plan now. But you feel drawn northward maybe. Or just forward. The village behind you sighs as you leave. You wave to no one in particular, and yet someone waves back. The road is quiet again. But you're not alone. You've got memories, a sheep mug, the phantom smell of roasted walnuts, and the vague suspicion that something ancient just winked from behind that bush. You keep walking. Because this story, it's not done yet. You follow the worn cart path out of the village, your boots chewing softly at the dew-damp dirt. A thin mist still clings to the ground like it forgot to leave with the night. The sun peers lazily over the horizon, and for a moment, the trees around you look like they're exhaling gold. Your destination? Well, there isn't one, but you're headed somewhere. And sometimes that's enough. You pass through a stretch of forest where the birds speak in riddles. Or maybe it's just your imagination playing dress up again. One of them sounds like it's saying turnip, and frankly, that's about as medieval a bird as you can get. You smile to yourself. The fair may be over, but the absurdity of it follows you like a loyal hound. By midday, you reach another village, smaller than the last. No walls. No market square. Just a cluster of huts and a few children attempting to race snails. A woman in a crimson coif leans on a fence, eyes squinting at you like she's measuring your soul or your purse. You ask about local festivities, but she only shakes her head. We don't do fairs here, she says. Not after the haystack caught fire and sang hymns in Latin. Right. So moving on. You find a bench beneath a knotted apple tree and rest. An old man joins you. Doesn't say hello. Just pulls out a pickle and gnaws on it like he's interrogating the brine. After a long silence, he finally mutters, "You've got the fair look." You turn to him, one eyebrow gently threatening to escape your forehead. "You've been to one of those fairs," he clarifies. You nod cautiously. "Recently." He hums. "Most folks forget after a day or two. But you're holding on to it." You ask what he means. He tells you, in a voice as thin as onion skin, that medieval fairs, real fairs, had layers. Not just booths and games. They were rituals. Moments stitched into the calendar not just for trade, but for time itself to catch its breath. Sacred pauses, he calls them. Glitches in the script. Some say, he adds, that those who linger too long under the fair's spell start seeing the threads between things. The phrase. The hidden hinges. Historians still argue whether medieval fairs were linked to ancient pagan rites or simply grew out of agricultural routines and church calendars. But local folklore tells a different story, one of fairs as thresholds. Gates, if you will. Temporary holes in the everyday. You want to scoff. But after what you've seen, the puppet that sneezed, the merchant who sold you a joke that actually laughed, it's hard to dismiss him. Before you can press him for more, he stands. Careful what you follow, he says. Sometimes the ribbon leads you where you weren't meant to go. And then, like some turnip-wielding spirit of cryptic wisdom, he's gone. You rise. Continue. The path leads into the hills now, where sheep outnumber logic and the grass smells like memory. You pass a pile of stones marked with the same odd symbol from that map you lost. A spiral. Simple. Vague. A cosmic doodle, maybe. You follow it. There's a clearing ahead, flat, ringed with elder trees. And in the middle, nothing. At first. Then, as you squint, you see a pole. A maple? No ribbons today. Just the pole itself, tall and weathered. Around it, traces of trampled grass, like dancing feet made of smoke. You sit. Wait. The sun drips lower. A breeze moves through the trees like a breath through sleeping lips. And then you hear it again. Faint. That same strange music. Not quite flute. Not quite wind. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere. You don't panic. You don't even move. You just listen. It doesn't ask anything of you. It simply plays. As the light dims, you notice shadows gathering. Figures that might be people, or just memories playing charades. They don't approach. They dance. Slowly. Like water remembering how to ripple. And in that moment, you understand. The fair isn't a place. Not really. It's a rhythm. A pause in the heartbeat of the world. A loop in the thread. And once you hear it, truly hear it, you're always a little bit part of it. Forever. The figures fade. The music stops. You blink. The clearing is empty again. And it's dark now. You don't feel scared. You feel full. Like something ancient just curled up beside your spine and whispered, "You're part of the story now." You stand. Walk back to the road. But something's different. The stars feel closer. The trees seem to hum. And somewhere deep inside your boots, a song hums back. You descend the hill slowly, boots softer now, as though they've learned the rhythm of the land beneath them. The air is thick with night, cool, a little damp, like the inside of a forgotten cellar where old stories huddle in the dark. Every sound you hear, the rustle of branches, the low croak of a distant frog, feels oddly placed, like actors reading from a script they half remember. The path winds you past a crumbling stone wall, likely once part of a manor or a monastery. You run your hand across the mossy top. It feels oddly warm. Behind it, something rustles. You pause but decide not to check. This isn't a horror story. Probably. As you walk, your mind drifts again to the fair. Remember the acrobat who didn't seem to touch the ground? Or the woman selling bread shaped like mythical beasts, one of which suspiciously blinked at you? They weren't just tricks. Or maybe they were. But they were tricks old enough to have teeth. And somehow they followed you, not in body but in rhythm. The way your steps fall into a familiar pattern. The way your thoughts begin to rhyme. Ahead, you see a cottage. It's simple. Thatch roof. Timber beams. A faint light flickers in the window. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney. It smells like beeswax and thyme, like comfort wrapped in a quilt and placed near the fire. You knock. No one answers. The door creaks open. Inside it's warm. A kettle simmers over the hearth. There's a single bed, a small table, and an old chair draped with a faded green shawl. Whoever lives here clearly stepped out, but only recently. The chair is still warm. You check. Because, yes, you're that kind of nosy. You sit. Your body sighs. And for the first time in what feels like days, maybe lifetimes, you let yourself be. You spot a journal on the table. Bound in leather, fastened with a ribbon the exact color of spilled wine. You open it. The first page is blank, except for a single phrase written in ink that smells faintly of honey. Every fair ends, but not for everyone. You turn the page. And there it is, a drawing. A rough sketch of the maypole. Of dancing figures. Of you. The handwriting is familiar. Yours. Wait. You flip back to the cover. No name. You check your satchel. The journal wasn't there before. But now it is. Historians still argue whether medieval fairs ever created permanent cultural shifts, or if they were simply fleeting indulgences. But for some travelers, the fair didn't fade when the booths packed up. It lingered, like perfume on an old scarf, like music heard in a dream. You close the journal. There's a soft knock at the door. You freeze. But then laughter. Not sinister. Not sharp. Just warm. Familiar. You open the door. There's no one there. Just a folded piece of parchment on the stoop. You unfold it. It's a ticket. For another fair. Date. When the moon remembers your name. Location. Where the river forgets how to flow. Right. So. You pocket the ticket. Because who knows? Sleep is just the rehearsal for the next strange adventure. And now, dear listener, let's begin to drift. The fire in the cottage burns low now, casting soft orange light that flickers gently across the walls, as if even the shadows are growing sleepy. You pull the blanket up around your shoulders, and the chair creaks just enough to remind you that it's real, that you're here, that rest has found you finally. Outside, the night hushes the last of the wind. Even the trees have settled, their limbs no longer reaching or whispering, just waiting. Every sound is softened, rounded at the edges, like the world itself is tiptoeing. You close your eyes, and in the darkness behind your lids, you see the echo of the fair, faint lanterns swinging, faded colors trailing, laughter stretched thin across memory. But it doesn't demand anything from you anymore. It's just there, like an old lullaby you once heard by a fire, half forgotten and oddly sweet. The world, for all its noise, has given you this moment of stillness. Your breathing slows. The weight of the day gently unbuttons itself from your shoulders. And all that remains is quiet. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Let the past wander. Let tomorrow wait. Tonight belongs only to you. Rest now. Sleep. Dream gently.